Thank you to those who are joining us. We'll take a couple minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Region 8 Comprehensive Center's Getting Ready for Summer virtual learning series, our third session in the series. Today's session is all about creating a warm and welcoming summer learning climate and culture. So we are going to learn and explore the building blocks of program culture to lay a foundation for positive relationships, connection, and engagement and joy this summer. So I'm Elizabeth Eaton with the Region 8 CC. I'm excited to be back with you again today as we work together to make this summer the best yet for learners in our region. I am joined by my colleague, Emir Davis, who will introduce himself in just a minute. But first, we wanted to welcome you to our session today and take some time for some brief introductions here in the chat. So please take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat, share your name, your state, your district or organization, and your role. And then in the spirit of creating joyful summer learning programs, we would ask that you share one thing that brings you joy as we look ahead to summer. It could be warm weather, a trip you're planning to take, delicious summer produce. I love to bake, so I am really looking forward to all the berries and fruit that summer has in store for us this season. So tell us what brings you joy in the summer. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share just a few housekeeping items. We would ask that you stay on mute when you're not speaking during our discussion today. We're going to have times throughout our session for discussion, and we will invite you to come off mute and ask questions. And of course, feel free to drop questions or share comments, reflections in the chat throughout our session today. Like our session last time, we have a dedicated note catcher that includes links to resources and space for you to make notes throughout our discussion. So we'll drop a link to that in the chat as well. We will be asking for your input at the end of our time today. So thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Feedback is a gift, and we thank you for sharing that with us. And then one last thing, we will be recording today's session for those who are not able to join us today. So look for a link to that recording shortly after today's session. All right. Well, thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat and for sharing what brings you joy in the summer months. Now I'd like to introduce our Region 8 CC team. As I mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Eaton. I'm a technical assistant specialist with the Region 8 Comprehensive Center, or Region 8 CC, as you'll hear us refer to it. Most recently, I've been working with a dedicated team in Ohio as they are implementing their whole child framework and supporting a whole child approach to education. We know that quality summer programs support a whole child approach to education. So I am joined by my colleague, Emir Davis. Emir, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Emir Davis. I am also a TA specialist with Region 8 CC, former principal, former teacher, and hope to bring my perspectives and my failures as well, and my triumphs to help guide us through this conversation today.
Thanks, Emir. Well, now I'm going to provide just a little bit of information about the Region 8 CC before we dive into our session today. So just as some background information, just in case you're not familiar with us, the Region 8 Comprehensive Center, CC, is one of 19 regional centers in the Comprehensive Center Network that provides high quality, intensive capacity building technical assistance to clients from state, regional, and local educational agencies and schools in Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. We serve clients in the region by helping to identify, implement, and sustain effective evidence-based programs, practices, and interventions that support improved educator and student outcomes. So now we all know a little bit more about each other, a bit more about the Region 8 CC. I want to remind ourselves of where we started in session 1 and continued in session 2, and where we are heading in today's session 3. So during our last session, we talked about the research from the RAND Corporation that helped identify the essential elements of summer learning programs and planning as part of the National Summer Learning Project. For today's session, we will be reviewing and applying the research on creating a warm, welcoming, positive site, climate, and culture for your summer programs. And then during our 4th and final session, which is next week, we will explore the essential element related to academics and enrichment. So specifically looking at strategies to support learning acceleration during the summer. So if you were able to join us last time, we talked about developing and aligning recruitment messages for your summer learning programs that are tailored to the needs and interests of students and families in your community that we work to identify in our first session, session 1. In today's session 3, we're going to explore the building blocks that create a warm, welcoming, and joyful summer learning environment. So this includes support for staff to run effective programs and strategies to streamline logistics so that each day runs smoothly and according to schedule. Although we know that that doesn't always happen. So also thinking about plans for when things don't go according to plan. So speaking of plans, let's talk about what we have planned for today's session. So during today's session, we want to do 3 things with our time together. We want to discuss strategies for creating a warm and welcoming learning environment during our summer programs. We will outline components of a clear, positive message of the summer site culture. And we're going to identify ways to equip, train, and support staff for summer academic and enrichment offerings. So I'm going to talk us through some of the strategies from the research for creating that positive summer climate and culture. And then Emir is going to walk us through a few activities to apply those concepts and strategies to your community context, your summer learning program. All right. Well, let's ground ourselves in the research into creating a positive climate and culture for your summer learning program. But before we do that, I am going to remind you of our work together in session 2, where we identified the learning needs and priorities of students and families in our communities. Throughout this session, as you are considering strategies for establishing a positive site culture for your summer learning program, as you are engaging in our activities that we have planned, keep the needs and priorities of the learners and families in your community in mind. And you can refer to your note catcher from last time if that's helpful as we're going through. All right, so let's talk about what the research tells us about the importance of establishing a positive site climate and culture. We know that an effective marketing and recruitment strategy can get our learners in the door on day 1, but it is a welcoming, warm, and well-organized program that keeps them there throughout the summer. So when we talk about a welcoming program, when we say site climate and culture, what do we mean? Well, according to the National School Climate Center, site climate refers to the quality and character of the program, relationships, and teaching and learning practices that shape youth and staff experiences. So it's the foundation for the shared norms, goals, and values that define the program culture and environment. What does the research tell us about site climate and culture? Research from the RAND Corporation through the National Summer Learning Project found that sites with consistently positive climates offered students an inclusive, friendly place where staff remained engaged with students throughout the day, from drop-off to dismissal, and everywhere in between. So in addition to promoting positive youth experiences, a positive climate also appeared to promote regular attendance in the summer programs. Of the items that RAND observers rated at the end of each summer observation day, the quality of staff to student interactions was the item most strongly and consistently related to whether students appeared to enjoy the day. The research tells us that clarity, consistency, warmth, and engagement were the hallmarks of sites where researchers noted that students enjoyed their day. So the research identified several practices for building a positive summer climate. Supporting strong relationships between students and staff might begin by training all staff on the importance of positive adult engagement with students throughout the day, not only during class. And we're going to talk about this as we go on today. One of the practices that programs can consider is training staff to interact with students during transitions, arrival, departure, mealtime, in addition to time where they're in the classroom or engaged in enrichment activities. To promote a coherent culture, programs can develop an explicit message about their program values and how students are to be treated, and train staff on both. Researchers found that staff using similar words and concepts and engaging with students in similar and often positive ways was a sign of a coherent site culture. For example, staff might tell students, in our program, we are about treating each other with kindness and respect. And we're going to talk more about developing that clear, positive message, that unified message as we go on today. The researchers also found that providing opportunities for students to use their voice and demonstrate leadership and build those leadership skills also contributed to a positive summer climate and culture where students felt like active contributors in the program. So from this research, we are seeing some clear tips for establishing a positive site climate and culture. And these tips are generated through the Wallace Foundation and included in their summer learning toolkit. And the link is included in your note catcher for today. So first tip, communicate a clear, positive message about your program to staff, students, and families. So related to communicating that positive message or reinforcing that positive message might be scheduling time for fun, program rituals, celebrations throughout the summer. Second, you want to train your staff to implement the culture and climate that you want your program to have. So provide training before your program begins that clearly articulates the academic, social, emotional, and developmental goals of the program, why they matter, why they're important, and train staff on the importance of positive adult engagement with students throughout the day. We've talked about that a lot. You're going to hear that some more as we go on. And then lastly, monitor progress by conducting quality observations, feedback, looking at your data can help support a positive site climate and culture. Ensure that academic and enrichment teachers actively engage with students throughout the day. Periodically observe instruction to understand which teachers may need additional support or resources, and also identify what is working and how that can be amplified throughout your program. I am gonna pause here Feel free to add any questions, comments, reflections that you might have in the chat from this research. What's speaking to you? Also think about your program's site climate and culture. What's working? What would you like to continue, enhance, amplify? Maybe what's not working, or what would you like to see for this summer? What would you want to strengthen, add to, enhance? So keep all of those questions in your mind as we talk about the building blocks for positive site climate and culture. And for that, I'm gonna turn things over to Amir.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That research was intriguing and enlightening in some ways, and just in my own experience, helping me reflect on ways on which I could have done better. Um, so to summarize, the building blocks of a positive climate and culture are communicate a unified message and vision, a vision that galvanizes students and staff and partners. You also want to equip and train staff to execute that vision. And then you want to monitor progress towards your goal, the goals that you set forth. And for the remainder of our session, we'll walk through each of the building blocks, share actions for you to consider and discuss with your team, and provide tools for you to capture the decisions stemming from your discussions. So let's dive more deeply into this first building block, communicate a unified vision and message about the climate and culture. When creating your vision for positive site climate and culture, your team must consider the following things. And we sort of bucketed them into two categories. First category is the goals for your summer. Who is your targeted audience? And by now you should have already identified those folk. What do you want to be true for your target audience at the end of the summer learning program? How are you going to achieve the outcome you set forth? Here, I want you to be as specific as possible. What experiences must students have to achieve the outcome you stated? So if your goal is to have fun, if it's to be engaging, what does fun look like? What experiences constitutes fun for students? What do they say constitutes fun? The second bucket of things for you to consider is thinking back to your community needs and priorities, the ones that you discovered during your needs assessment. So how does your vision align with the priorities that your community express in this needs assessment? In a minute, we'll prompt you to discuss these questions with your summer planning team. But first, let's revisit the results of our needs assessment from our last session. So crafting a vision based on insights from students, parents, caregivers, and other stakeholders can be challenging. Right? You have to synthesize all of those sort of inputs and create some action plans um, based on those inputs. It could be challenging, but thankfully you've spent time gathering stakeholder perspectives and brainstorming ways to respond to their priorities, their aspirations, their needs. In last week's session, we used this tool to detail our plan for understanding our target audience. And if you have not yet viewed session 2 or did not attend session 2, I encourage you to access the recording of that session. The link for that recording is in the additional resource section of your session 3 handout. So to recap my approach to understanding the summertime needs and priorities of my audience, I conducted focus groups with past students, parents, caregivers, past staff even. And what I found is that students, you can see in the second column, students elevated the desire for more engaging and fun activities. And also, I looked at the data, and particularly for our literacy data. And I saw that, hey, we have to get more serious and more specific about how we are targeting intervention for some of our most needy learners. For parents and for caregivers, they also expressed a desire for fun activities, but they also wanted these activities to be cost effective and they wanted us to provide daily transportation. So those are fair desires, fair needs. In this third column, we have, this is where I really want us to sort of pay attention to. This is the where we brainstorm how we will respond to those needs and aspirations and priorities. And how I decided to respond to the expressed needs was to purchase literacy intervention curriculum, train staff to implement it, while also inviting more organizations like the local museum, local STEM-based programs, to provide enrichment opportunities. With parents, I'm still looking at that third column now. We had welcome events to introduce them to our enrichment organizations because some of them were new. And we also set aside funds. I had to really shake our finance team to set aside funds for more busing to ensure every participating student had their way to and from school. I recap this exercise so that we keep, as collectively, the stakeholders' insights and responses at the forefront of our mind throughout this session. And the idea is that we translate those insights to our vision for our summer learning program. Okay, enough about me speaking. Um, we pose these questions to you for you to discuss with your team. And you can find these questions on page 2 of your handout. With your team, you're going to answer these questions in these 2 buckets. The goals for your summer. First, you're going to think about who is, or restate your target audience, who they are. What do you want to be true for your target audience at the end of the summer learning program? How are you going to achieve the outcome you set forth? Again, being specific as possible. And what experiences must be true for students to achieve the outcome you stated, while keeping your community needs and priorities in mind. Based on the needs of the priorities, I'm in the second column now. Based on the needs and priorities that your community expressed, what words would you use to describe the culture of your program? Remember, words are effective to inviting folks to your program. You want to use words like fun, things that resonate with them. The second question under community needs and priorities, you want to think about what do you need from staff to execute that vision? How will you maintain high levels of student engagement? What does joy look like in your program? What daily or weekly routines or rituals will you include in your program to inspire joy for students and staff? And what does positive student adult interactions look like? So take 10 minutes to answer and discuss these questions. Be sure to assign a note taker to capture your ideas and then share them with the group. If you're viewing this recording, you're not here with us live, now is a good time to pause the video, set a timer for 10 minutes, and discuss the questions on page 2 of your handout. All right, welcome back. So I'm sure we have some exciting next steps. If you're here with us live, go ahead, put your answer in the chat. What words would you use to describe the culture of your program? Fun is engaging, enriching, adding to awesome life experiences. I love that. Awesome. Okay, now it's time to create an overview for your summer learning program. So with your planning team, take another 10 minutes to create an overview or program description for your summer learning program. If you already have a program overview or description, I want you to think of how might you incorporate the responses to the questions in the previous activity. We want you to consider your responses to the questions in section 1, the previous exercise we did. Uh, you can also review sample summaries in from Dallas Independent School District and the Pittsburgh Public Schools in the additional resource section of your handout. Again, take 10 minutes to create or refine your program description. If you're viewing this recording, now is a good time to pause the video, set a timer for 10 minutes, and type your program overview on page 2 of your handout. Awesome. So putting it all together, uh, it's important that we gather all of our thoughts from our vision and how we're going to plan to equip and support our staff in some sort of codified document. So I'm thinking about a codified document, a handbook, a handbook to summarize our summer experience and that I can communicate to staff, stakeholders, and that is what we are building here now. So we are documenting your vision, your goals for your and your staff handbook. You're going to use language and tones to reinforce the joy, the fun, whatever the scriptures you put in there, you hope to create through your program. We're also going to put in our summer handbook, our plan for training and equipping our staff on the policies and practices. You want that outlined in your handbook. Okay. So we encourage you to put the great and awesome overview or program description in your staff handbook, or on your summer learning website, or in some place that orients your students, your parents, staff, and partnering organizations. This next building block to an awesome summer learning program is to equip and train your staff to execute the vision you created. When creating or refining your professional development plans to equip, support, and train your staff to execute the vision for positive site and climate culture, I'm sorry, positive site climate and culture, your team must consider the following things. And we bucket them into two categories. One is timeline and logistics. The things that we want you to consider is where and when is training happening? Who needs to be there? How often is training occurring? Will participants be compensated? What does that look like? How much would they be compensated? How many hours would they dedicate to training? The second bucket that we want you to consider is align the content of your training to your goals. We just created this beautiful overview with our goals, our mission, our aspiration for summer. So now we have to buttress that with our great content for training. Are you adopting new goals or using new programs or technology? Does staff need to be trained to use technology? What does training look like? Is it going to be virtual? Is it in person? Is it a whole group? Are you going to have celebratories? I always had t-shirts or polos that were branded. I would put them out and folks would come in. And it was just sort of a way to say, hey, we are all on one team. And on every Friday, we would wear those shirts with pride. Um, don't tell my finance folks. I mean, that was discretionary funds that I had, but I thought it was important. We on team summer program. And then this last piece, how will you support staff to have positive student interactions? So we pose some additional questions for you to discuss with your team. And the idea is that you and your team share your responses to these questions, and then you will compile and synthesize your ideas into your professional development and training plans. So you determine who on your team needs to be a part of these discussions and these decisions around professional development and training. You can find these questions on page 3 of your handout. And with your team, I want you to answer these questions here. Let's start with the ones on the left column, the timeline logistics. Where and when is training happening? Who are your participants? Who is responsible for training? Is it an outside contractor? Are you implementing a new system and you need a representative from that company to be there? How will you ensure that training is high quality and impactful? For the content of training, as you're designing that content, you want to consider, what do you need from adults to execute the vision? How will you differentiate training for directors, for coordinators, for teachers, and the various buckets of staff that you have? How do you need to train staff to implement new technology or new programming? How will you train and support staff to have positive interactions with students? And how will you inspire joy in your training? Are you going to buy T-shirts? Are you going to buy food? Buy food. Are you going to buy other giveaways, that have people attracted? Are you going to keep your training short and impactful or long and boring? Don't keep it long and boring. Take 10 minutes to discuss these questions. Be sure to assign a note taker to capture your ideas and then share them with your group. If you're viewing a recording, now's a good time to pause the video, set a timer for 10 minutes, and discuss the questions on page 3 of your handout. Welcome back. So we had a great discussion. Now let's create or refine your professional development plans for your summer learning program. So with your planning team, take 10 minutes to create the plan for equipping, supporting, and training your staff to execute this awesome summer. If you already have a PD plan, based on what we've discussed, what adjustments will you make to your PD plans? Where can you get more specific about the outcome or about who's leading? If you can also, we provided some sample professional development plans from the Dallas Independent School District and Pittsburgh Public Schools in the additional resource section of your handout. You can view those for inspiration. Take 10 minutes to create or refine the plan for training staff on page 3. Again, if you're viewing or it's the recording, now's a good time to pause the video, set a timer for 10 minutes, and type your PD plan on page 3 of your handout. The final building block that we'll cover is monitoring progress. Uh, Thus far, you have begun to build or refine your staff manual or handbook with your program's mission and awesome vision. You have also developed a training schedule and a scope and sequence. You have considered who needs to get trained, how are you going to inspire joy, how are you going to equip your staff to execute this mission. In this section here, we'll craft a thoughtful approach to monitoring our progress toward achieving the goals of our program. So monitoring progress first starts with enacting a clear plan for collecting, analyzing, and sharing data. How your program collects and responds to data ultimately impacts the quality of your program. So this isn't my ideas. I'm not that brilliant, right? To consider data. I'm not. The research supports that idea that monitoring progress to goal, that is collecting and using data to drive decisions, has profound positive results on the quality of learning. And the Getting to Work on Summer Learning second edition, um, the Rand Corporation found that districts that collected and used data to drive program reflection and planning with program and district leadership made changes that resulted in substantial improvement to the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of the program. In particular, Rand recommends building a process to collect and discuss data focused on program attendance, focused on instructional practices, analyzing the use of time, how adults and students use their time and time on task, and also the site climate. So improving the overall program quality can increase student engagement and ultimately yield better student outcomes, we first need to develop our plan for collecting data. When you are creating or refining your plans to monitor progress, consider the following buckets here. First, you want to assess learning. As you are assessing learning, I want you to consider what data did you collect during past summer programs? What are you measuring this summer? In what ways is it important for the goal of your summer program? For my summer program, I'm measuring literacy. I'm establishing a baseline. I'm also measuring growth on a week-to-week basis. How will you assess how students feel about their learning? What curricula or supplemental programs are you using? How frequently do those programs report data? And what do you do? What do you plan to do with that data? Not only are you assessing student learning, Elizabeth had given us great research on not only if we want our programs to be enriching and engaging and fun, we also have to measure and assess student engagement and joy. So, what is your process for collecting and analyzing and sharing student behavior engagement and cognitive engagement? What is your process for assessing the quality of student adult interactions? And what are you looking for in student adult interactions? On page 4 of your handout, you have a summer planning calendar workbook, or a link to it rather. And here, using this tool, you can sort of map out your plan to monitor progress. And this is your homework. I'm not going to have you do it here, but I want you to, with your planning team, walk through how your plan for monitoring progress before, during, and then sharing your data after your program is done. You want to celebrate those great wins. So um, access that link on page 4, and with your team, you're going to work through this workbook here. And with that said, I'm passing it to my main gal, Elizabeth, who will walk us through the next steps.
Thanks so much, Emir. And thanks for walking us through all of those activities. You've given us a lot to think about as we continue to plan and prepare for this awesome upcoming summer. All right. So let's take a minute, as Emir mentioned, to wrap up and discuss next steps. So before we talk about next steps, let's think about one word. We've been thinking about words and language to describe our summer programs, but I want you to think about one word to describe your learning during today's session. What word is coming to mind for you? What word or phrase are you leaving here with? It might be something you learned or a next step you need to focus on to create the climate and culture you want for your program. Please share your word in the chat, share your phrase in the chat. The word that keeps coming to mind for me is fun. Summer is a time for fun. So let's do what we can and follow what the research tells us to create fun learning opportunities for students in our communities this summer. I hope that word or phrase stays with you and inspires you as you continue to plan and prepare for your district, school, or program's best summer yet. All right. Keep those words coming. As we close out today, just 3 quick things to look ahead at what's next. Be sure to take a minute, share your feedback about today's session, what worked, what can be improved. Feedback really is a gift, so thank you for sharing that gift of feedback with us. You can click the link there, link in the chat, or scan the QR code on the screen. For future sessions, our last session in our series is next week, if you can believe it. So be sure to register. You are not going to want to miss our conversation next week, which is focused all on exploring strategies to accelerate student learning during the summer. Again, that session will be held next Tuesday, May 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and you can register. The link is in the chat for your convenience. And then finally, our Region 8 team is offering free coaching, no cost coaching, to support your efforts in preparing for summer. So if you're interested in receiving coaching support, which can involve a phone call or two or something else, maybe it's working with Emir on, the monitoring progress piece, that homework piece, working with Emir directly and getting some feedback from him. Please feel free to reach out to Emir. His contact information is there on the screen, emir.davis@icf.com. We'll drop that in the chat as well. Again, this is optional, no cost opportunity to receive some more targeted support to help you get ready for summer. Any questions or comments before we end today's session? Not seeing any here in the chat. Well, I just have to give a big thank you to all of you for your time today, all of the work that you're doing on behalf of students to support their learning, support their fun over the summer. A big thank you to Emir for being my partner in summer fun for this series and today's session. We appreciate all of your time, your efforts, your contributions, reflections, and the hard work that you're doing to get ready for summer. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you need anything from our Region 8 team. And again, contact Emir if you're interested in coaching. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next time.